Welcome to the Voodoo Power Podcast.
Welcome to Plates and Pancakes. We're sitting down today with Paul Kolody. Coach Kolody is the head strength and conditioning coach at Hunterdon Central Regional High School. He is also the owner of Advanced Performance Training, where he specializes in strength and conditioning, speed, agility, stability, mobility, and flexibility to help in sports preparedness and injury mitigation. Prior to Hunterdon Central, Kolody was the sports performance and rehabilitation manager of Somerset Medical Center. He also served as a GA for Bridgewater State College. Coach Kolody has a master's degree in exercise science from Bridgewater State and a bachelor's degree in athletic training from Pfeiffer University. Along with all of his other pursuits, Kolody is active in the NHSSCA and has hosted the New Jersey State Clinic. He also co-hosts the New Jersey High School Strength Podcast with Zach Evanesh. So welcome to the show, Coach.
Thank you, Stephen. I really appreciate it.
Well, I got to spend the week listening to some of your stuff, and man, you just have a tremendous amount of good stuff out there. So we can kick it off with this, but you started pursuing the strength and conditioning model before it had really taken hold across the country, and especially in the high schools. So kind of being a pioneer back east and getting all this stuff going, what was that? What were the challenges?
Well, the challenges were, believe it or not, the board at Somerset Medical Center in that board meeting saying, who is going to pay for strength and conditioning? This was before, the high schools were big. I had the CEO of the hospital say, why are we spending money on this? Who's going to pay for it? And I said, just wait and see, because I'd visited Mike Boyle probably 6 months before then when I was traveling with the professional baseball team I was with. And I spent about a half a day with Bob and his staff watching how they just ran athletes through that program. I said, this is what I want to do. And I started doing it with our baseball team, brought it back to our hospital. And again, the biggest hurdle or biggest obstacle right off the bat was board trying to spend money to build this facility. We were going to do the physical therapy, but having performance in there as well. And it took off. There was only one high school strength coach that I knew of at one of our local high schools, and I stayed away for that one. That was professional courtesy. But all the others, I was getting kids from all over.
And you took that model and you eventually moved into the high school realm, but you came into the high school realm as a non-teacher. So were you accepted by the staff, or were you just kind of an outcast that just knew weights and you were just kind of your own thing?
Oh, well, there was a couple of people there before me, and they had started to build the program. But when I came in, I turned it into, I hate to use the word functional, but more of a performance program versus just weightlifting. So it was a little bit different at first, not only for the coaches, but for the student athletes as well, who did everything on hammer strength. It was a big room with hammer strength, and there was one of everything, and there was a lot of lines, and kids definitely got stronger using those machines. But when we did overhead squats for the first day with dowels, they couldn't even do it with their heels on the ground. They came in the next day and their backs were sore, and that's where the light bulb started going on with some of these kids. Like, wow, we're strong, but we're not as functional as we need to be. We're almost useless as athletes. And all of a sudden, their speed and their vertical jump. The first thing I did is I bought a Vertec, and we started measuring things and measuring their KPIs. And the kids started to see, holy cow, what we're doing is paying off faster than it's ever done before. And that's when it really took off, and my numbers skyrocketed from there.
You came into the high school setting before that was super popular, but then you didn't just stop there. You've taken the high school role into new areas with leadership classes, and this is some of the stuff I heard you touch on in some other podcasts that really interest me. So how do you go about setting up a leadership class?
Well, the leadership system that we did was first set up by Jeremy Boone. It was called Desire to Lead, and it was set up for high school students across the country. He came up with this during COVID. So if you remember back, they did the play mentorship program, and Gary was on with Jeremy. And they started talking, and Jeremy spun that off, and I became pretty friendly with him for the whole year after COVID. And he started Desire to Lead, and Amanda Bird, and Coach Loudon, and a lot of other coaches across the country had anywhere from 12 to 20 student athletes that would be, we'd get on Zoom call every 2 weeks, and we would do breakout sessions, and the kids would talk to each other about what's going on in their school and their struggles in leadership. And it was such a great platform, from power of story and developing a vision to what mission you're going to have to help you get you closer to that vision every single day, and the guiding principles you're going to use in that mission. And it was week after week after week, and just great stuff for these kids. Real life leadership. It wasn't motivation or inspiration quotes. It was things that they could take in that leadership Zoom and go and use the next day. And it was amazing. Stephen, some of the stories where, I think it was a girl in Utah, went to one of her board meetings and said to, I think it was 3 board members that were, being vetted for the position, and said straight up, I want to hear from all 3 of you. What does it mean to be a leader to you? In front of the Board of Education, and to be able to stand up as a 17-year-old and say that at a board meeting, these kids were turning into real life leaders.
Now, as you're developing leaders, I'll jump around a little bit on the questions, because
Yep.
I had a question in there, but you opened the door up for it. So you're trying to create leaders, you're trying to empower them, and you're trying to give them a voice.
Yep.
How does that work when that comes back around and you get the brave kid that's willing, like you said, to step out of their shell and then maybe call out some stuff with you as a coach or another coach? How is that received?
I invite that. We say it all the time, that you have to be able to not only, you have to be a leader worth following.
Creating leadership classes and building curriculum. Did you work all off Boone stuff, or did you have a direction in your mind that you wanted to take it as well? I mean, was it a collaboration? How did that come together?
Oh, it was a collaboration with his information, and then what I would do is I would run with it. So if we had a Monday desire to lead meeting, the following Monday when we didn't have it, we would have a lunch where our kids would come in and we would discuss all that information that we talked about. So it was our own little desire to lead in our own bubble after, that week after that. And we usually did that twice every month, if not once every month. And then the thing I like about it is it's real. Like I said, it's real life. It's vision, it's mission, it's guiding principles, it's identity. And it's things that they could use every day. And I don't think we have to spin off of that too much. For the kids that are 16, 17, and 18, I think if they can get really good at that content, that anything else after that is just gravy as far as their growth.
I got online and I was looking at Jeremy Boone's stuff. I'm not familiar with it, so I'll hit you with a few questions on stuff that popped out on his website, and we'll kind of see what you think of it. But developing a growth map for you as a coach, but also for your athletic leaders, how does that look?
Well, the growth map, without giving you too much, I want to give you the sizzle and not the steak. But the first 3 things that we look at for growth are truth, trust, and toleration. So first of all, there's no improvement without the truth. And I say this to my son, and I say this to a lot of our athletes that may be struggling with their playing time, or with anything else that's going on. Go and talk to your coach. And again, there's only one way you can improve, is knowing the truth. And then once you know that truth, from whether it's your coach or your family or whatever you're doing, you have to be able to trust that that's the case. And then after you're starting to go in that right direction, toleration. What are you going to tolerate? That there's things that you may be okay with. So if you're going to tolerate things that maybe are going on the wrong path, well, you better take a step back and see what's going on for your own growth. So there are other pillars that we look at as far as growth, but those are the big 3 that we talk about with our student athletes: are truth, trust, and toleration.
Looking into it, and I feel like this is really important, and maybe it doesn't happen enough, or especially coming from both sides, maybe coming from the athlete back to the coach and the coach back to the athlete. I think a line gets drawn, and in a lot of cases where you're the adult, you're the teacher, they think they're the student and they don't have anything to offer. But learning to tell your story, I think both sides can learn a lot from each other's story. So how do you get the athletes to open up and tell their story, especially when some of it not be things they want to discuss?
That's the hardest part. As a coach, a teacher, a strength coach, and even as a parent, that's the hardest thing is I think that truth and trust has to be so strong with that student athlete that they can come in and discuss pretty much anything with you. And I've had some of those conversations with kids candidly. I open up my weight room, my office at 10:30 every day at lunchtime. So they can come in and talk about life. They can talk about nutrition. And I've had several conversations with student athletes about some things that were, going, maybe not the best in their life. And we just started talking about it and talking about direction and obstacles and barriers. And, sometimes if there's a barrier up and you can't get around it, sometimes you got to turn around and go in a different direction. And, say a student who's maybe gotten cut twice, 2 years in a row from a sport, and they've been working their butt off in the weight room, and they come in and they just don't see, first of all, they don't see why, but second of all, they want some direction, they want some help. And those are some of the examples I can give you that we worked with over the years with some of our student athletes, and it's had some really, really, really great outcomes.
It seems like strength and conditioning coaches, whether they want to be or not, they get thrown in this role of being a mentor, and kids, for whatever reason, don't mind talking to a lot of strength and conditioning coaches. So how do you learn to be the mentor that kid needs, where you're more selfless than selfish, and you can give back good advice without your own ego getting in the way?
Man, I'm still reading the book, and I have it in my bag over here. But Garrett Keith, hold on, I'll pull it out. Garrett Keith talked about this at our Northeast Regional. It's called Inside Out Coaching. So it's transformational coaching versus transactional coaching. And when I first started, it was do it my way or don't do it. And that was very transactional. I was trying to get something from the kids, you know what I mean? Instead of giving them something. And once I started to show the kids that, and I know it's a cliche, that I care so much about not only how much weight they can lift, but how well they're performing in their games, what their family life is like. You talk about vacations and family and get to know their families. It was a whole nother ball game for my strength and conditioning. That now I was trying to give them more versus getting more out of what we were doing in the weight room. And I've never been an accolade guy. I'm honored when I get a call from you about doing a podcast or anything that happens in the NHSSCA. But I can tell you right now, getting letters and notes from kids and emails from parents saying, you've been a difference for my son or daughter, that's the biggest thing for me. And having two kids that have gone through my program, I wish the best for them, just like I do for my kids.
It seems like this was thrown at me, and it wasn't something that I was probably as prepared for as I would have liked to have been. But how do you manage the really tough conversations when, let's say, you might be dealing with one kid over here that has a really bad injury that's going to affect his career, or another kid over here that just had a slight of judgment and things didn't go their way. The decisions may not have been what they wanted, that anybody wanted, but now they have to deal with the consequences. So when you sit down with these athletes and you got to have these tough, honest conversations, what does that look like?
That's two different. That's almost like apples and oranges. With the injury, it's being an athletic trainer for the first part of my career really prepared me for that. To be able to sit down and talk to them about what I've seen, what I know, how we're gonna work with this injury. We have a lights out athletic training staff. So we have two athletic trainers who I really work with a lot, and just to be able to sit down and have a real-time conversation with that student athlete about that really makes them, I think, feel more at ease. And there's nothing that's easy about injuries, especially ones that could be like an ACL, that could be an 8-month injury or a 9-month injury. But I think that we've done a pretty good job of getting these kids to understand where they are, and more importantly, setting that GPS for where they need to go. Um, the other situations, I mean, and I had one the other day in the weight room where I had some younger student athletes who don't have a big training age in there, and um, maybe not paying attention on the spotting side, and a bar moved a little bit faster than I wanted to towards the student athlete. And there was a little bit of levity with it. And that's when I stopped the whole room, blow my whistle, everything stops. And a teaching moment to let these kids know that, hey, this is the best room in the school, bar none. We can have the most fun. We can have the best results for this body. It's the only body we ever get. And you can work on that body, but we could also do a lot of damage in here. And if you don't pay attention every second when you're in here, that damage could be pretty severe. So I got my point across, and I stopped the lift and sent them out. So now they know, and it was about 10 minutes early. Now they know, um, you know, this is a business, and each one is a little bit different, and you got to handle them as they come across, across your desk. But again, 13 years of doing it at the high school, and then all the time before doing that, I've got a pretty good handle. Earlier in my career, when I was younger, I used to fly out the handle a little bit more, but again, I've gotten a pretty good handle on how to take care of it now.
I think I heard you say this, and I can relate to this a little bit, but the programming in the weight room is teachable. The
Yep.
numbers, the X's, the O's, the program you want to run, all of
Yep.
that can be taught very easily. But learning to relate to the kids is so much harder.
Yeah.
So as you mature and you get further away from the kids' age, how do you find ways to relate back to what's going on in their life and the way society has changed?
That's hard too. Everybody's saying that the kids are changing. I'm not sure they're changing as much as um, how we're guiding them along the way, but uh, using social media a little bit more, having some fun, maybe not being as serious as far as um, allow, we used to do the gritty. The kids would do that, and I had a no gritty rule. They couldn't do it in the weight room. And then, opening up and having a gritty competition the one day, and just trying to be at their level a little bit more uh, on the stuff outside the numbers a little bit. I think the numbers still count. I think they still need to understand how important those are as far as their performance. What we're doing in the weight room may not transfer to the field or the court if we're not moving the bar at the right velocity, if we're not, getting the KPIs where we need them to. So that may not transfer, which is our ultimate job. So having a lot of fun doing those things, if it doesn't relate to the court or the field or wherever they're trying to perform, uh, and doing that fun stuff maybe is wasting our time, and that's the only thing that these kids don't get back. And they have a full-time job, by the way. Our kids at Hunterdon Central, they're in school. School starts at 7:30, so most of them are getting up at 6 o'clock or even earlier than that to get on the bus. We're a huge district, so some of them are 30 minutes on the bus. Think about a fall athlete, 7:30 to 2. Some of them come to me before they practice. Some of them come after practice. If they're not getting out of the weight room until 7 o'clock, some of them have a half-hour ride home. 7:30 they eat. 8 o'clock they're doing homework. Um, that's a full-time job. So we have to make sure that we're giving these kids the right amount of balance as they go as well. Fun balance, and yes, making sure they understand why we're there in the first place.
So that leads to a whole new set of questions. But as you're watching this unfold and you're watching demeanors change and stuff through a long football season or a long wrestling season, long volleyball season, how do you help them learn to manage their schedule in a way that they don't get burnt out?
Over and over and over again, discussing nutrition, hydration, uh, fun. All the summertime is a great example of that. Kids all the time, Coach, I'm not going on vacation. I'm dedicated. I'm getting it done. I'm like, that's the worst thing you can do. I want you to go away for a week. I want you to unwind. I want you to give your body a chance to take a deep breath. I have a saying I tell the kids a lot of times: more is not always better, but I want more sleep. I want more relaxation. I want more time with your family. I want less cortisol, development in your body, because that's a big hindrance on their testosterone and some of the hormones in their body that help growth, having that excessive cortisol. So I want them to have that downtime. I want them to, hey, well, I know video games, everybody bashes those, but I want them to get on and play some video games and have some fun with their friends. And I never saw that being such a big deal until my son's best friend moved away to South Carolina, and he's on with them, every other night playing games. But that's his only interaction with his best friend, and it's not just a phone call. They were having fun, and you could hear him laughing and yelling, and I think they have to have that as well. So it's got to be a good blend. Homework, yes, they got to get that done, but they got to find that time, that half hour to unwind and have a little time for them.
In all of this, it was brought up, I believe, by Amanda Berg in the podcast I listened to with you and her. And she made a pretty cool statement that I'd never really thought about it. But as strength and conditioning was once something that nobody ever thought would be in the high school setting, now it's a staple everywhere. Leadership councils might be the next evolution in high school athletics. So how has that changed your school to make it worth the investment for other schools to try this?
Well, our AD is completely bought in. He's not only been on our Zoom calls when we were doing Desire to Lead, but he's also brought in speakers outside of Desire to Lead to talk about leadership and develop even a bigger core of student athletes that have become leaders. And I think it's been a huge growth pillar for us at Hunterdon Central. Now the goal is, or the challenge is, to keep it rolling in the right direction and not let it stop. And last year, Jeremy wasn't able to do Desire to Lead, but I've already had conversations with student athletes this year about getting it going again and having that good core 15, 20 student athletes and meeting at lunch twice a week and starting that talk about story. Where do we want to be this year? Where do we want to be as not only for yourself, but as a culture of Hunterdon Central? And I think, as these kids start to hear that story and start to develop their own story, I think we get better and better at as far as being an athletic department, not just, Jimmy and Joey and Susie individually. I think we learn that cultural piece as well.
As I've gotten to be an adult and look out over what leadership was always told to me that it was, and then seeing it for what it is, I wonder about this more and more. But creating leaders that aren't just a mouthpiece of the staff or a mouthpiece of the coach, or I need you to go out and tell these guys this. How do you empower leaders where they're their own leader and they're just not a repeat of what the coach wants?
I ask them all the time. The first thing that Jeremy would ask us is, why would anybody follow you? You've just been named captain. Okay, great. Why should anybody on the basketball team follow you as a leader? Because captain to me is leader. So if you can't answer that to me, I want you to go home and start thinking about that. Why should people listen to what you have to say? And I'm not saying about being a jerk and yelling at them and giving them just content. I'm talking about context. How are you going to speak to them? How do they see you every day as a leader? And those are things that I have those discussions with our kids. Is why should anybody follow you? You just got named this position. All right, so let's take that to another level. And we're having some conversation with some of our, because it's the fall and we just had some new captains named this year. I'm starting to have that conversation with some of our quote unquote captains right now to talk about, are you a captain or are you a leader? And I think that's a big deal. And I think with some teams, it comes down to, what's on their shirt. I think I said this in a podcast before. If you're going to be a coach and you're going to put something on the back of your shirt, that should be as soon as the season ends. What's your mission for next year? It shouldn't be, like 7 or 8 seniors deciding 3 weeks before the season and put it on the shirt. It really has no meaning. Let it have meaning. Let everybody work towards that next season and that new mission. And I think that's a big deal as well.
You touched on it in there, and I added a note on this, but you brought up communication. I hear that a lot. Good leaders are good communicators, but it has to be contextual. If it's just words, nobody will buy in. So teaching leaders to have good communication with context, how does that take effect?
That takes effect day in and day out. So I'll speak to our seniors. So I had a senior pizza party here this summer for our football team, and that was the first thing we talked about is how are you going to talk to your teammates? Because all of you right now are leaders. How are you going to speak to them every day? Is it going to be, hey, let's go, get your butt in gear, or is it going to be, hey, Jimmy, let's go. We gotta pick up the pace because this week when we play, Phillipsburg, they're going to be fast and they're going to be coming off the line hard. So it's got to have that context so you can word it differently to your teammates and your peers. Now they see you as a leader, they want to follow you instead of you just yelling at them. Because that tends to be, like you said, sometimes if you have a coach that just tends to yell all the time and doesn't give any context, the leaders will follow suit with that. We have great coaches. Our coaches give tons of context for everything they do. And they're the first to put their arms around our kids, even if they have to discipline them for something. And I think the kids see that, but they need to be reminded that as a leader, that's something that you have to do as well. You have to put your arm around a sophomore and say, hey, Jimmy, that's not the way we do things here at Hunterdon Central. We need better from you.
We touched on this earlier and we were having some audio issues, but I thought your answer was good. So we'll circle back. I'll re-ask the question where it's a little more clear. But you're always going to get those brave kids, those almost anti-authoritarian kids. And they will take this and run with it, and they will come right back at you with the criticism of the job you're doing as a coach, as a teacher, whatever the case may be, a leader.
Mm-hmm.
How do you accept the criticism from them and put it into a constructive manner instead of just getting mad and being, I'm the adult, you're the student, you'll do what I say, I'm leader by default? How do you work that out?
Yeah, I welcome that. We have that discussion, and I'll lead with a question. So, okay, unbelievably great question. So how do you see us moving in a direction that maybe you want to see, or the direction where you see I'm coming up short? And then we have that conversation about, all right, well, Coach, I don't think we're lifting enough weight. I think we need to be lifting more weight. Absolutely. Okay, so let's talk about that a little bit. Where are our numbers? What's your body weight like? How fast are you moving it using the output? Let's do this. Let's see what your say it's on squat. Let's see what your vertical jump looks like over the last 6 months. Going to team builder. Holy cow, you haven't put anything in your team builder. So how could you come to me with and we'll talk about context versus content, with context when you have no backing to say that we're not getting stronger? Well, how do we know that? How do we know that we're not increasing our power other than you putting more weight on the bar? What's it doing for our key performance indicators? Because I'll absolutely say let's put more weight on the bar if we can see that we're not making progress. If you're doing your job and putting all your information in, and then we can see that, let's work together to build maybe a new direction, and then we'll work from there. But I welcome that. I have one of our baseball players, every week I'll get a text from him like, hey, coach, what do you think about rear foot elevated this week? Or what do you think about this week? And I think about it and go, that's a great idea. Let's start to talk about that. And I'll even text him or call him and talk about it a little bit to get his idea why he did that. And we'll move on from there. So I think as a younger coach, I used to take that a little bit more personally. Now I think of it as, hey, you know what? I'm developing kids who understand strength and conditioning and understand the weight room. And I'm pretty proud of that. And I'm glad that they come to me with that feedback.
Do you feel by accepting it the way you do now that you open up a better line of communication and better relationships with your athletes?
Yeah, we talk about it all the time. We're building, we're not just communicating, but we're building connections with these kids. And connections, if you do it the right way, can really withstand any dispute that you have. Just communication sometimes is just words. And the kids don't necessarily take it the right way. But if I build that connection and I have that tough conversation with a kid, and he has that tough conversation with me, we can get past that and we can work on and move ahead as a functioning unit versus well, no, we're doing it my way and shut up. And now I've also blocked that kid out, and he may not come back and train with me. And I've lost maybe one of our better student athletes because I was too pig-headed, you know?
Do you think sometimes we undervalue some of their opinions and some of their ideas because they are kids?
It could be, but again, you have to take a look and you have to lead with that question. So give me some ideas why you're thinking that. And if and they say, Coach, I just looked at my speed over the last 6 months, and I've only gained like 0.05 on my flying 10 with 5 yard running. And I look at it too and go, holy cow, maybe there is something we could be doing a little bit different as far as KPI wise. And I have to look at myself in the mirror and say, is my programming actually doing what we needed to do on the field? Because right now it's not showing up in the weight room. And then, and you've seen this too, where it doesn't necessarily show up in the weight room, but then they go out and they play, 2 weekends later, and I get an email from a parent. I don't know what you're doing with Jimmy, but he's killing it. You know what I mean? So maybe he may not be the best tester or runner in the weight room, but when it comes to what it's doing on the field, holy cow. And I've had both happen. I've had kids increase by, 0.15 in their flying 10, and they're not getting any better on the field. So that's not transferring as well. And you go, holy cow, what am I doing? So again, looking at Andrew Ryland and doing some of the prep for contact and some of the tumbling and rolling and learning from other coaches, I think has upped my game that way as far as trying to help our kids get better on the field, and not only with their running and everything else, but our jumping and swinging the bat or the field hockey stick or whatever they're doing on the field.
Good judgment comes from a lot of experience and possibly bad judgment. So working with an inexperienced population and creating paths to get back from a bad decision, how do you kind of set that up?
My bad decision or their bad decision?
Their bad decision, hopefully, but we've made a lot of bad decisions and we've overcome them, but now they're just starting their path.
Again, have to sit down with them and talk to them about, sometimes it's in the weight room, sometimes it's out of the weight room. And just, that's a hard one. It really is. Because again, with my own kids too, those are the conversations we have to have as far as good decisions and bad decisions. But it's what was your first thought when you decided to do whatever you did? And then how could you have thought about it a little bit different? How could you have approached it a little bit different? And if you're ever in that situation again, what are some of the things that so it's a learning. If you make a mistake, there's always a learning experience. What do you think how would you change the outcome if that situation ever sets up again? So E plus R equals 0. You have your event, your response, and your outcome. How's your response going to change the next time you do that? We talk about E plus R equals 0 a lot, especially early in the season, because kids are making those decisions in the summertime and down the shore, at the Jersey Shore, there's a lot going on here. And what it can do not only for themselves, but for their team as well.
Some of the best players are highly insecure, and I've learned that the more I work with athletes, they put on a really good front of what could be perceived as ego, but really it's a lack of confidence in a lot of these athletes. And they try to hide that perceived self-confidence by, I guess being a little bit more flamboyant. How do you help those athletes find a more true sense of themselves and are able to manage their insecurities?
Yeah, we talk about identity with them, and so what they think is their identity what people are telling them, or is their identity really who they are, who they say they are? And sometimes when people go up to a student athlete and say, "Man, you're the best, you have all of this," and they start to believe that that's truly their identity, when that goes away, who are they then? That's when we have these kids that are struggling the most at, say it's the, lights out baseball player, and everybody's telling them how great they are, and something happens like we talked about before, an injury, and they lose that identity. They lose that, or they don't want to lose that, and they stop taking risks. They stop working hard to get better and better. Then what? So we have that talk about identity all the time. We put it up, and we not only talk about individual identity, but we talk about team identity. What do you feel is the identity of our team this year, and what do you want it to be, and how are we going to grow that identity? Not only here in the school, but in the community. Sometimes again, those individual conversations are pretty tough. I've had a couple of those recently with some of our student athletes, and there seems to be some pushback right away because, well, here you telling me I'm the best player on the team. Well, okay, but right now that best player on the team is creating a culture that's pretty bad as the team. You know what I mean? And we have those conversations, and sometimes it's received great, sometimes it's not received so well, and I just got to keep working at it. I got to keep chipping at that a little bit because, again, I'm there to help make each individual better, but help the coaches make their team better as well. So I have two people that I had to really work with, like the kids and the coaches.
You came into this and you had a really good background in strength and conditioning. You worked at I can't even talk. You worked at a rehabilitation center, so you've worked with injured athletes, you've worked with healthy athletes. You came in early, created a good program at a high school. You've had major success. How do you keep from just stopping your knowledge from where it's at? What makes you keep reaching? Now we've talked so much about leadership. What made you go down this avenue here with leadership, and then this avenue over here with new training ideas? What pushes you to keep maturing and learning?
I think my background, I grew up in a small town, blue collar. We didn't have a whole lot given to us. We had to do as much as we could to not only improve our sports. We had 100 kids in each class. So if we didn't play all the sports, some of our teams would struggle. So we learned how to play. We developed that camaraderie, that blue collar attitude. That's not for nothing. That's why it's white T-shirt day at Hunterdon Central every Friday. I don't know if you've heard of John's Manville Insulation, but that's Manville where I grew up, and the factory was enormous, and they made asbestos insulation. And most of my friends' fathers and mothers went to work there in blue Dickies and a white T-shirt. And they carried a pail and they wore a hard hat, and that's the way I was growing up. That's the way I grew up. That's what I try to instill in our kids, and especially when the NHSSCA came out and I started to develop relationships with Gary Schofield and Kevin Vanderbush and Jeremy Boone and Garrett Keith and Kevin O'Neill. And I mean, I could name Ryan Johnson out in Wayzata High School and Amanda Berg, and just hearing what they're doing and saying, yeah, I want to know more about how they're doing it. And then conferences showed up, and we started doing our regionals and our, you've been to the nationals, not a better platform for learning. And it just became a cascade of where do I go next? And I didn't have enough money to do everything, but COVID made a lot of things free. So, I mean, I was on Zooms almost every night. I got to meet Matthew Nine, and he and I did a podcast, and he's unbelievable. If you haven't talked to him before, Matt Nine down at Salisbury University, about how he does his accountability programs, unbelievable. And he does it at the college level. And it's just talking to guys like you and making sure I became friends with Zach. And, it's over and over and over again. I learn every day. And then Tony Villani, I saw you having him on here before. Zach and I brought him up, and we did the first ever game speed seminar. And it was unbelievable. And now that's part of my curriculum, how we do things. And I don't know, it's just the organization has been so good to me. And as an older, 56-year-old strength coach, I got to keep up. I have to keep up, and I got to stay young. And the only way I keep my energy going is to try and make myself better every day. Hope that answered it. That was a quite long-winded answer, but yeah.
Well, you're covering a lifetime, so it ought to be a long-winded answer, right? We had talked about this a little bit before the podcast started, and I had listened to a podcast with you and Zach, and you were talking about the implementation of Westside. And kind of before we got going, you said you lean more towards the Jim Windler ideas.
Yep.
From working with Jim, what have you kind of brought from his ideas and implemented in your weight room?
Keep it simple. I love the 5-3-1 because it's simple. The kids can understand it. If it's off season and you can add more accessories in, go ahead and have some fun with it. Make sure they have a meaning in your program. If you're in season, 5-3-1 I run with our football team because they can come in and today, you know what, we got a big game on Friday. We're 2-0. We have one of our biggest rivals who's number 8 in the state. We got after some squats today. You know what I mean? So we did 5s and 3s. We did the percentages based off of the 5-3-1 protocol, but you can always adjust them. And I let the kids know, hey, listen, here's what we're going to do today. I left the last 2 blank. If you want to go up, go up. If you want to stay the same, stay the same. If you want to go down, go down. Don't sell yourself short today. And we didn't do a whole lot of accessories. We did three other things with our squat, got them in, tested their flying 5-10, and got them out the door and got them ready to play football. So I love Jim's approach as don't burn a steak. Don't overcook it. That's why I love that program. And then I learned APRE from Gary Schofield and the way he manipulated a little bit. And that's one of my go-to off-season programs. We get to ring the bell with the APRE, and, I have that PR bell up there, and we get after it in the off-season with that. And it's really easy for them to understand. You hit this number, this is what you do. You hit this number, this is what you do. And we have a big chart up in the room, and the kids go to that and refer to it all the time. They cheer for each other, and it becomes – that's where some of that leadership comes in, because now these younger kids see the older kids taking, hey, you know what? This is what – hey, it's supposed to be 6 to 8 on this one. How come you only did 5? Oh, that's all I could do. Well, what's your weight say? Well, it says this, but it seemed really light, so I tried to bump it up a little bit. That's not what we're doing here today. So now we're developing leaders using some of these programs and keeping it simple enough for them to understand makes it really, really great for me as a coach, because now I'm developing new coaches.
I love the 5-3-1 program. It is so easy to manipulate into what you want to do, and you never get too far away from the core. So you can always bring it back around, recenter the weight room, and then it allows you room to try some other stuff, like you were talking about adding XPE into your stuff. Well, your 5-3-1's taken care of, so now you can start experimenting with other ideas that you think might help your guys, but maintain a core belief.
Yep. And I've built on that and using some of that West Side thought process with accommodating resistance. So we can add those in. Hey, you know what? We're having a stale week and we're on 3s. Let's throw some chains in. Even though it's 70, 80, 90, let's see if they can handle that 90, which is really 80% when we go off of 90%. But let's see if they can handle that with some chains. Let's put chains on the bar and get after it. And the kids are like, oh, that's going to be no problem. All of a sudden, that 3 only becomes 4 or 5 when they do that max rep set. If we're doing a max rep set, they're like, whoa, So they start to see that, how that accommodating resistance can help. And also how, again, now with the outputs, we can put that on there and how much it slows the bar down and how much they really have to think about moving that bar a little faster. So there's so much great stuff with it. And again, it drives that intent with the kids from week to week and month to month.
I know you didn't get way into the West Side because you did kind of spin off the Jim Windler stuff, but looking at the West Side and how much bigger it was than just powerlifting. I mean, he took a Russian model, Louis did. He took a Russian model and molded it to fit his needs. Is there anything you've taken from Louis or the Russians that you've kind of molded to fit your needs at the high school level?
I think there's a sprinkle of Louis Simmons and West Side and a little bit of all the programs that are out there right now, whether it's the accommodating resistance or how we do a box squat. And yes, I use all of those things. So some of the Russian things that I've learned from Zach, believe it or not, and some of the things that he studies, and he's an encyclopedia. Definitely with some of the plyometrics and some of the things. Esteban Javorek, I've used his all his complexes. Learned those from Rob Rogers a long time ago, back in the mid 90s and the 2000s, and I use those all the time. So using those not only in my pregame and my my neuromuscular sets where we're doing our Olympic lifts, doing our complexes before that, or using them on a hard work Friday and putting some complex work on in those days. I think with that balance, I think my programs have become really good over the years, and using some of that as my background.
Coach Dvorak, his story is just so interesting. I was able to sit down and talk to him and just to listen to what he overcome to make it to America and then achieve so much while he was here is definitely motivating.
I just saw him on your list, so I got to listen to that podcast. And again, learning it from Rob, and he used it all the time at Middle Tennessee, not only barbell but dumbbell complexes. And I started using those when I was at the hospital, and I fell in love with them. And again, as a primer, to prime the pump a little bit, or as a workout, they've been fantastic in my programs.
I heard you discuss this in. I think it could get a little tough in a big room, so I was interested in asking you how you might do it. But matching the training model with the personalities, I mean, you have to look at your athletes through a little bit different lens than just they're all the same.
Yep.
So understanding the personalities in the room and who likes to grind and who likes to go fast and who likes what lifts. I know you can't change everything you do, but how do you accommodate some of these lifters to get a little bit more out of them?
Moving from rack to rack as much as you can in a big room like that. Again, I like to coach down the line so I can see everybody, but there may be a time I'll go down to rack number 4, and I know all of those guys there are maybe have a higher training age, and I may say, hey, listen, I know the numbers say this today, but I need you to get after it. If the numbers seem a little bit low, I want you to really work and work hard. Whereas the next rack next to them may be a bunch of freshmen still squatting with their heels on wedges, doing a goblet squat, you know what I mean? But the other guys are either doing a back squat or a heavy front squat. I can always have that conversation with them without stopping the room and working down the line. Also, I can see if they're doing stuff that's too light and go down the line, because that could happen as well, where, you know, they get in their own little crew and they're like, you know, without looking at their weights, they just get under the bar and just do the same weight, all 4 of them. I say, hey, listen, I know you don't all have the same number. What are we doing here? You know, is this going to be a day where you're not going to get anything out of this? And I go back to the time. You know, time's the only thing we can't get back. That's the biggest currency. Why waste it for the next half hour or 40 minutes or hour we're in here? Why waste that currency? Because that currency could actually help you get better on Friday night when we need you, you know? So I can go that way. And, you know, they may look at me and go, Coach, you know, you're overcooking it, you know, but I'm really not. I really want you guys to challenge yourself. That's all.
You mentioned it earlier, the white T-shirts on Friday, and growing up in a blue-collar town, watching blue-collar adults go and put in their time in the grind. A lot of kids don't realize what that's like anymore, so creating struggle in your environment to kind of teach a little adversity but not overdo it. Do you just set that up through the weights? How are you able to throw a little change up in there and create some chaos with some struggle at the same time?
If you've ever looked at Robert Dos Remedios, he has a chaos list. He has chaos lists. I've taken some of Vern Gambetta, some of Robert Dos Remedios, some of Rob Rogers stuff, and I've made my own chaos days where we'll have 5 or 6 exercises in a cluster, but they may not all be right next to each other. And I'll give them time to get from section to section. I'll have 3 of those clusters set up. So I can have 15 different stations set up. And in each cluster, if I have 5 exercises and I have 4 things set up at each exercise, if you think about that, that's 20 kids per cluster. So I can have 60 student athletes working in the room, and I can even go bigger than that in my room. But I could have 60 student athletes working off a timer, and say one of them is inverted row, and there's 4 inverted rows set up right here. I may have on the other side of the room where they have to do Nordics, and they have to find the blue pads. They don't know where it is. They know what they're looking for. They have 15 seconds to get there. So is it going to be one kid running by himself to get there, or is he going to say, hey, we got to find the blue pads, let's go? Now they become a team, a group of 4 that has to work together to figure FIO, I call it, figure it out workouts. And when I first got to Hunterdon Central, I tried to coach everything. And what I found out is that these kids couldn't figure it out. they really couldn't. They needed me to tell them everything and everywhere to go. So I started having these chaos workouts, and every once in a while lose my mind, you know what I mean, blow the whistle and stop everything and say, what are we doing? And, stand up in the middle of the room and start all over again. But they do a much better job now on understanding and leading their group. And because they know if I lose my mind, we're going to start all over again. If we're 20 minutes in, we're going to start at square one. The next group's going to have to warm up outside. You know what I mean? And that's the way we do it sometimes. And it becomes a really good atmosphere because now, after the first time that they mess up, they get really locked in and dialed in. And sometimes they don't mess up at all because they know it. And I always have to have freshmen in with the upperclassmen. It's not just an upperclassmen core. They have to have a mixed group, and then we go from there.
And talking about that, hard work doesn't necessarily mean miserable work. So setting up hard work, but keeping the attitude about it good, is that harder sometimes than you think it should be?
I don't know, with social media and the grind, some of these kids want that. But going down to Charlotte this winter with Zach, we did a road trip and listening to Tony Holler talk about, well, what is the definition of a grind? It's taking something and pulverizing it down to powder. So, is that what we want to do to our kids? We want them to actually be greased a little bit. We want them to have good days. And we want struggle, but that struggle shouldn't be every single day. It shouldn't be a grind every single day, because when are we going to have good days? Tony's stuff was the hardest day of the week should be game day. So the rest of the stuff that we do during the week should be productive, but it shouldn't grind them. It should be just enough to make sure that they can perform on that hardest day of the week, which is that game day or that track meet, because he's a track coach. And I've started to adopt that a little bit more and get the kids to understand that. And that goes back to, again, more time with their family, eating better, not stressing out about so many things, but enjoying the time that they're on the field with their friends. And I think that's a big deal as well. And if you look at his Feed the Cats platform, that's the way he goes towards it. Now there's sprint-based football where some of these teams are doing less during the week and concentrating on just the football aspect of it and not beating them up. And on Friday nights, they're so fresh that they're kicking the crap out of teams, So I love that mentality, and I'm starting to go with that a little bit more and letting the kids understand that a little bit more too. The biggest kickback, believe it or not, is the parents, because they're the ones, they want, hey, make my kid puke, make them hard. They're not working hard enough. They need to be conditioned more. My message today on the wall was, to win this weekend, we got to be 100% fast, 80% conditioned. I want us to be running by people in the fourth quarter, not so much not breathing hard. I want us to be able to run by them, get that one step of separation, like Tony says, so that it takes them 22 yards to catch us. So the team that's always sprinting, chances are they're losing because they're always trying to catch up. So that's our approach this week. So I hope they got that message and started working on that in practice.
I know with the sport-specific era really taking a hold and everybody trying to match their exercises to the sport, how important is it for you to get your athletes strong out of position?
Always. It's up on my wall. Move well, move strong, move fast. And that move well is squat, hinge, push, pull, lunge, carry. Those are the things that we really concentrate on. I tell every single athlete that walks in our door, those are the 6 main functions of a human being, whether you're a soccer player, a lacrosse player. Lacrosse does it with a stick in their hand. Soccer does it with the ball at their feet. So there are some nuances that we have to change a little bit. But for the most part, I need them to be able to separate. I need them to be able to close. What's the number one job on the soccer field? You got to be able to separate so you can get a shot off, or you got to be able to close so you stop them from shooting. That's it. Think about that. And the kids go, well, oh, yeah, that's pretty much it. I want to be able to get closer to them so that they don't get a good pass off, or I need to be able to separate so I can get a good pass or a shot off. Oh, that's it. I need to be able to separate so I can get a little bit higher so I can get that header and get that done. That simplifies the game. It does. So now you can practice some of the other things, take care of what we're doing in the weight room to get that separation or that close, and make that the most important thing that we're doing, the strength is going to happen. Hey, listen, if you don't have a whole lot of testosterone as a sophomore, don't worry. We're going to work on your neuromuscular strength. We're going to make you move really well. So the way you push is efficient movement. Then when the testosterone kicks in, guess what's going to happen? You're going to become superhuman. Now we're going to get you stronger and stronger. But now you're already athletic. Now we're just going to build more strength on that athleticism. But if we try to build strength on a non-athletic kid, they become strong and useless. And that's not what we want. So we want to make sure that they understand that squat, hinge, push, pull, lunge, and carry is going to be progressively overloaded. And we're going to do that over a 4-year period, just like a nice stew, in a slow cooker. Jeremy Frisch talks about that with his long-term athletic development all the time. And we try to, again, sometimes in a town with, 15 gyms, we get the parents saying, no, man, we need to squat them heavier. No, you have no belts in your room. Why aren't we doing that? Why aren't these kids grinding? We're winning games. We're healthier. We're faster. We're getting separation. And the strength is there. Believe it or not, we're strong as heck. Just because we're not squatting 2 times our body weight and maybe we're squatting 1.5 times our body weight, but we're still faster than the other team in the fourth quarter, and we're out jumper and out running them, and we're putting them on roller skates. When we're on offense, we're putting their defense on roller skates. That's what we're looking at.
We've talked a lot about healthy athletes, but your background is working with a lot of injured athletes.
Yep.
So when you start working with an injured athlete or you start that first consultation, do you almost feel like you've got to get through almost the stages of grief first before the work can begin? A little bit of depression, a little bit of anger, a little bit of that has to be kind of worked through before you can really get to a point where you can help them.
Yeah, I think, again, working with our athletic training staff who are lights out, just to get them back into that weight room atmosphere again. And, if it's a squat day and they're in a boot, we're doing single leg squats. If it's a squat day or if it's a hinge day and they're in a boot, they're doing TRX assisted hinges, single leg hinges. But they're doing it along with their teammates. And then with that, if we're doing an upper body accessory, they're doing all the upper body stuff. Again, how much are they non-weight bearing? Well, we got to be a little bit more careful with that. So we have to make sure that they have their own bench, their own area, so that they're not going to lose their balance and put weight on that extremity. There's a lot we can do with these student athletes to get them right back into the swing of things again. Amanda Berg has the best sign on her wall. It says, everyone is welcome here. And that includes injured, not injured, female, male, starter, backup, person who's never played before. And I think getting them back into that and making sure they understand that, hey, if something happens, you're hurt, make that appointment. Come see me right away. Let's see what we can and can't do. It may be not right for you to be in here right now, but a lot of times it is, and we can get through or work around what's going on. And I think that's what my background in athletic training really helps me with in the weight room. And, getting these kids in the right frame of mind. And again, there's nothing like decreasing their cortisol low level and having them stop worrying about what's going on and just get some really, really positive vibes going in their life. And that's a good thing.
Do you find it helps to give them an avenue to keep them a part of the team? So whether that be on the headset or helping at a squat rack or coaching in some sort of manner, does that seem to help get over the process of healing quicker, at least mentally?
No doubt. And you got those peer leaders that you have in the weight room. And if it's a kid who can't participate that day, you're helping me. You're on the clipboard. We're doing our flying tens. You're telling them their times. You're yelling it out. You're charting for them. You're walking around the room, just making sure everybody's on the same page of what we're doing. If they start to become noise of what's going on, I'll have that conversation with them. Hey, you know what? I want you to be somebody who's being an energy a producer here, not an energy vampire. We've got to have that energy going with that. And if you're just noise or you're a distraction, you're being that vampire or what we need. So they have to understand that. But I'm going to say 9.9 out of 10, they do understand that, and they're in there, and they're a positive influence in our room.
You brought that up. I didn't have this question on there, but if you would have told me 5 years ago, if you would have mentioned energy vampire, I would have been like, what are you talking about? But the longer I live, the more I see it. So handling somebody that sucks the energy straight out of the room, is it just a conversation, or does are there other means of handling that?
That's a conversation. That's when we got to pull them aside, and let them know you can either be with us or you can be, without us. And we don't need to have you in here. I get there right now. This is a privilege to be in this room. There's no reason that you have to be in this room. I'll let coach know that you've been excused from the weight room. And I've had this happen several times and they never come back. They don't come back. And sometimes they do, but if they don't come back, maybe it wasn't important to them. And I want them to understand how important the weight room is. And I have, as they walk out, I have 10-80-10 on my door above it. And I don't know if you've heard this before, but it's 80% of the population just does exactly what they have to do. No more, no less. There's 10% of the population that's doing above and beyond and bringing people with them and raising the energy, and energy mirrors energy. And there's 10% of the population who wants nothing to do with what you're doing right now. I tell everybody in the beginning of the year, I'm going to get more of those lower 10 into the 80. I'm not going to get them to the top 10 right now, but I want them to understand how important it is to be in here and to be a person who at least comes in and shows up every day and bring you to that 80. And then once you get to that 80, you start to understand how important it is. Maybe I can get you to that top 10 and get you in there. But to get more and more of those bottom 10 into that 80, and some of the ones who don't, they may phase themselves out. They may not want to put on that HC or that jersey. Some do, but not in my weight room. You know what I mean? I'll just say, listen, you don't have to be here. This is a privilege, and I'm okay with you not being in here. And sometimes they show up, sometimes they don't. I've had kids not come back. Their parents pick them up after practice, and they go home. And they miss out on a lot. And a lot of times they don't continue on as a student athlete as well, because that's the type of personality that they have. That's the last thing I want. I tell them all the time, let's work on getting these bottom 10 into the 80 and then working our way up from there. And then you can see them nod their heads when we're talking about that, because I don't want anybody to be excluded. Like I said, I want them to all have value from what I'm giving them, just like I gave for my kids when they were there too. They're all like my kids. I'm a dad, and they all know that.
We talked a little bit about programming. We talked a little bit about injured athletes, a little bit about leadership. We kind of been all over the place, but no matter what program you use, you need to understand it very, very clearly before chasing the next rabbit. Is that something you always understood, or did you get yourself a little bit spread out and then slowly figure out that you needed to really, truly understand one thing and then start branching out?
No, there were some hot mess years. There's no doubt about it. And I want to say it was probably 1998, 1999, the Perform Better Summit started happening. And I would go to the Perform Better Summit. I'd come back and I'd say, all right, I got to start plugging all this stuff in right away. And sometimes I throw the baby out with the bathwater, and all of a sudden I'm going, oh, what did I just do? And sometimes it's hard to undo those things. But yeah, there were some years when I was a young strength coach, and I just I never knew that you had to find the spot for that to fit into your box. You know what I mean? It may not fit in right away. And then as I got older and I got a little bit wiser, and I started learning more and more about different programming and how it'll work. Now it's more about not burning the stake. Now it's more about how can we make these kids better on the field, better on the court, not crushing them, but still getting their squat up, getting their deadlift up, getting all of those things that everybody perceives as the strength numbers have to be bigger, but also making sure that when they step on the court, those numbers don't erase their performance. You know what I mean? So I heard somebody talking about that on the podcast the other day. Is strong enough, or what is strong enough? I think that if kids continue to make gains in their strength and really good gains over time, it's not going to be crazy gains all the time. And their performance continues to improve on the court or on the field, I think that we're going in the right direction. And those are measurable. Those are absolutely measurable. And you could talk to the coaches. Hey, how's Jimmy doing in practice? Man, he's struggling right now. His handling skill isn't very good on the court. And then again, in the off season, you could talk to Jimmy. Hey, Jimmy, what are we doing with our ball handling? You know what I mean? In season, it's tough to do that because he's getting the ball handling in practice. But off season, now you can start to have those conversations. Hey, let's talk about, all right, let's get we still got to work on our vertical. We got to work on our separation, things like that. But what are we doing for ball handling? What are we doing? And I can be that voice for the coach in the off season to help that student athlete. Again, I'm a tour guide. I want to make sure that these kids are getting better, and I'm going to give them the best value for their buck for the 4 years that they're there.
Some of what we talked earlier with the leadership and the growth map, you can kind of come back and do that athletically as well. You can set the stage for where the improvements needs to be, where we're trying to go, what the athlete needs to do to take them to their final destination, whether that be college or end of athletics or whatever that might be.
Absolutely. And again, we're talking about just the weight room only. College, that I know a lot of college weight strength coaches love the Olympic list. And if I have kids who aren't very well versed in the Olympic list, I know that that's something I'm probably going to have to get them versed in a little bit before they walk out my door and they go to wherever they're going to the next level. So those are things that, and I make that clear to the kids that going into their senior year, knowing that they want to play, hey, you know what, we may be doing a little bit more on the Olympic side. So here's what I need you to do right now. When we're doing our trap bar jump squats, I want you to make sure we're getting a big shrug when you're doing those trap bar jump squats. So we start to understand how much important that shrug is when we're pulling that bar up and we have to get our elbows through with that clean, or, that second pull as we come up. That's just as important as how fast the bar is moving off the ground. I want the bar to move to a certain period, and I want the speed to come up, just like any other rotational athlete, like a golfer. Amateurs are amateurs because most of their club head speed is up here in transition versus when they're striking the ball. They're trying to move the club heads fast here, and then when they get to the ball, they're actually slowing down. Same thing with Olympic lifts, everything else. And that's where output and some of those velocity-based programs really, really work on, really, really dial that in. And I'm excited to get to drill down with that a little bit more this year. But going back to the question with the student athletes, I just have to make sure that they understand that what we're doing in the weight room has to improve them on the field. Or what they're doing in here is, again, talk about that time waste. It's just maybe a waste of time as far as what they're doing to be, a leader in their sport and to be for that improvement to take hold.
Talking about your athletes that you're going to send on, how long did it take you to learn to put your ego to the side? I don't know if you're an Olympic lifter or not. I don't know if that's what you do in your school or not. It must not be, because you said you got to prepare athletes for college. So at what point in your career did you say, okay, we don't do the Olympic lifts, but I need this kid to be ready to do that? So you checked your ego and jumped into something maybe you weren't totally comfortable with to help the athlete.
Well, we do Olympic lifts. So again, that depends on every year is a new year. So the student athletes coming in, I may have had a bunch of young student athletes who were unbelievably great for their freshman year and sophomore year. And in the junior year, I don't know what happened, but they're inconsistent. They're not going to go on Olympic lifts. You know what I mean? So we do our jump shrugs. We do our high pulls. Right now we're in our high pull phase, and my consistency has been great. So now I feel comfortable that going from high pulls, today we went to overhead snatch. So with a bar, I feel that, and I've learned this before, it's easier to teach them to pull the bar and catch it over their head, not in a full squat position, but to learn that rack position right away, to get that bar speed and understand that. Our bar speed today was ridiculously good on our volleyball players, on our football players. Everybody who did the snatch today, it looked great. And they understand it's got to move fast. It can't be that here and then push it up over their head at the top. And as our off-season athletes get really good at that, we'll start working on our rack position. Front squats are going to be our squat when we get into our 5-3-1. And they're going to start, again, consistency kills. So if they're consistent, we're going to keep pushing towards getting them to that ultimate goal of big pull through, elbows up, and catch it in that rack position. I'm USA weightlifting. I let it lapse, but I took that and I took it at Hillsborough High School and with East Coast Gold, and that was one of the best things I did as a young coach, to learn how to at least coach kids through the Olympic lifts. And then, we go from there. When it comes to the packets, when they come, I love calling their strength coach, getting the kid on the line, and putting them on speakerphone and talking to them about the program, what we're doing right now, and is it okay if we continue to keep them going in the right direction? We'll start to add these together. I don't think I've ever had a strength coach say, no, you got to do it my way. They're like, wow, you guys are doing so much. And I think college strength coaches are starting to understand what high school coaches are doing. And I think they're becoming more comfortable. And I think they love that connection as well. Some do, some don't. I love having that phone call. And the kids love it too, because now they see how much I care about their growth when they go to the next level. If we can, we'll drive. If it's within driving distance, I'll drive a kid and we'll go and have a visit. And I've done that with several of our student athletes. And it gets me to meet more people too. I love that part of what we do. And if I can do it and I have the means, I'm going to do it for all our kids, or as many as I can.
We'll kind of get to wrapping up. I know it's getting late where you are. So just to hit you with a couple more questions, but we all have so much passion for this. You know, we eat, sleep, drink, strength conditioning, athletes, all the things that go with it. How are you able to balance the job with a family and other goals you had in life? How did you make it all work?
That was hard. And my wife's a physical therapist. That's how we met. I was an athletic trainer. She was a physical therapist. She understands, the sports. When I was with minor league baseball, that was tough, being away. We played, 142 games as an independent team, which is a lot. When 70 of those were on the road. And as I started to evolve into strength and conditioning, believe it or not, my hours got a little bit better. But I'm still there till 7:00 at night, Monday through Friday. And the good thing is now weekends, our coaches are good to us, and we don't lift on weekends unless there's a extenuating circumstance where I have to be there. But some of the hard stuff was, my daughter being a pretty good soccer player at our high school and being 100 yards away from me on field number one and not being able to see her game because I have hoops in the weight room. When she got into basketball, it was a little better because those are at night. So I was able to close down and go in and watch her games. My son being a football player, I was at every football game. So that was something that was really exciting for me to be able to watch my son, freshman, sophomore, junior, senior year, and my wife being at the games, my parents, my brother would come in, friends. It became a family atmosphere and getting to know the parents that way. But it was tough. And my wife, I love her so much because she's given me the opportunity to do what I do. And I can't say there hasn't been some struggle and some tough times, but it's now at the point where both my kids are out of the house, we're empty nest, and went out to see my son's football game on a Friday. It was a Friday night game, and on Saturday, instead of coming home, we went up to and drove up to Vermont, and last minute, and went up and just spent a weekend in Vermont. We would have never done that before, because we would have had to come home for soccer or something else or football, and I really. I like the life we've carved out. Would I've done a few things differently, maybe, but I got a chance to see my kids grow and thrive, and develop an unbelievable relationship with my wife. That now I feel that for the next 30 years of our lives, we're going to continue to grow.
Well, Coach, I think everything you talked about tonight on the podcast has just been amazing. I appreciate you going into the leadership stuff so much. I know. You do a lot of strength and conditioning stuff, but we get to talk about that a lot. So leadership, I think it's really unique where that's heading and what can be accomplished through that. So I appreciate your time tonight and coming on the podcast.
Oh, no worries. And, if anybody has any questions for me, they can always contact me. I don't know if my contact information will be on the show notes. But again, Jeremy Boone is a great person to talk to. Gary Schofield. All of those guys in the NHSSCA, I think that you can't go wrong reaching out. Kevin Vanderbush, even though he's retired, he still is a guy who will accept the phone call and talk about a guy who was doing it for years. And I've had some great conversations with him. And I really just cherish the mentorship I've had from a lot of the guys in the NHSSCA, and I really can't thank you enough for having me on.
Well, thank you very much, Coach. And one of these days we may have to do it again, and we'll get a little deeper into a different topic.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Steven.